in that city. And if you really want to get connected to the local startup community, you can always reach out to the directors.
The same name, like startup?
Yeah, it's startup.
Yeah, it's a startup brand.
It was started in Silicon Valley, but right now they are volunteers, like Ranjan and I. We're not working for Startup Brand, we're just representing the community in Berlin. And yeah, we are here to connect basically entrepreneurs.
If you don't find a startup brand chapter in the city, you can also start one. Yeah, so this is the quick statistics about our chapter in Berlin. So we have so far did 62 online and offline events, and we have 4,236 community members, including all of you. And we hosted 100 speakers and influencers, and our reach in social media channels is about 28,000 people. So we are like community of entrepreneurs and founders who come together regularly and get inspired by the brightest points in our city, Berlin. This is our team.
3 people here today.
Some of us were missing. And in Europe we have 79 chapters.
I hope they're also still all there, so that's what I mean. Very likely you can find representatives in the city are going. Here's an excerpt of some speakers that were in Berlin, or we hosted in Berlin, founders of some famous companies.
Yeah,
sponsors, partners. We're always looking for sponsors and partners.
Yeah, because it's like a not-for-profit organization. We are like it's voluntarily events. So.
Yes. So we're super happy about the support by Neuland here.
Yeah. A big shout out to Neuland, Charlotte, for sponsoring us this event. And yeah, if you want to say something, Charlotte.
Gosh, I've already said so much since we had a tour with most of you. But for anyone that missed, I'll just briefly recap. Neuland's vision is to be the home of industrial transformation. We do that by connecting corporates, startups, and academia. We do that through our 30-building, 150,000 square meter campus, and we also do that through bespoke programming that connects the right people together. My name is Charlotte. I'm the head of community strategy here. It's super exciting to have you here with us. So we've wanted to do a collaboration with Startup Grind for a long time. And we're excited to be a collaborator, a community partner, and to be a home for Startup Grind in Berlin. Because you're joining us here today, and because the conversations have already been so inspiring, I want to offer you all free memberships to join. So we'll give you 6 months free membership so that you can become part of our community. We have, of course, a membership model, but not only a membership model, we also have office space, production space, and we have programming opportunities for you to participate in. We're specifically building a community geared towards founders, and we'll be launching a founder membership that provides the support of an accelerator through a membership model. So talk to me about it after the event. I don't want to take up more of the time, but thank you so much for joining us, and it's great to have you here.
Thank you, John.
And without further ado, we need to welcome our brightest mind of Berlin today, Mr. Johannis Hatt.
Which one?
Over here,
Okay, thank you. Wow, that's bright light.
Okay, Johannes, I'm turning behind you. As described, I mean, not
You're saying I'm old, right?
It's a polite way of saying you're old.
That's okay.
And yeah, as described here, you have built companies, you have invested in companies, and we felt you're a good person to talk to about the situation and maybe the outlook of startups in Europe, entrepreneurship in Europe, investing in Europe. But to get there, I want to start with some simple questions. This is just so yeah. Can you please describe what was your first job or the first project where you made money? Was it like a lemonade stand or?
The first job where I made money is selling Kinderüberraschungseier.
Okay.
So Kindersurprise. I found out that the ones with the little figures in there, they were 0.1 grams heavier than the average egg. So I would go to, and there you can see I'm old, right? I would go to cow food, which is also not existing anymore, put them on the little scale which was next to the Kinder eggs, put them on there, weigh the ones to find out which one had a figure in there, buy them and sell them for 3 times the price on the schoolyard. So that's the first time where I remember, or where I kind of invented a simple business model. How to make money. It was in, I think, I call it translated second grade, something like that. So pretty early on, when I was in school, like 7, 8, something like that.
Oh,
No
wow.
fixation.
Now I want to know what's the second one?
The second one I can tell you as well. Also there you can see that there was an age where you basically had telephone cards, right? And you put them into the phone booth, and you had a kind of a, either I think it was 10 marks, 20 marks, 50 marks, where you basically you had money on it, and then they became also a collectible. And since my young age, I mean, I collected nearly everything, right? From coins to stones, to stamps, to Kinder Surprise, so everything. And I also collected telephone cards. So I knew which ones were valuable and which ones were not. And then there was, thanks to Deutsche Telekom, who put up those phone booths, and because we like our cities clean, right? So they also implemented small boxes where you could put the empty phone cards in. And I thought, if people put it in there, somebody needs to get there and collect it. If I now find the location where they all come together, I can maybe go there and find the ones which are valuable, buy them or take them and sell them on eBay. So it took me one afternoon together with my best friend. We walked through all the Deutsche Post stores and asked, where are they collected? And they told us where that is. We went to that place and we asked them, hey, can we maybe have a look? And they're like, yeah, we don't care, we can. We're gonna anyways trash them. And then after every week we went there and picked the most valuable ones and sold them on eBay. And that was, I would say, in the income, we were maybe 13, 14, and it was like 300 marks per week. So quite a decent income.
A good friend to have like that.
Yeah, no, look, but I think so my personal background is my father is a teacher, my mom is a nurse. When I was born, my dad was 21, my mom was 23. So they were still students at university. They had time, but they had no money. So I grew up, I lacked nothing, right? So I always had my parents around me and it was a great time. But at one point, I realized we don't have that much money compared to other families. And I started to generate my own income.
Then how did this journey lead you to founding Fireside?
I think I went to university and I tried to work as an employee. And I'm not saying that it's a bad thing. It's just like, for me, it felt like I was not made for this. And the reason being is, no matter how much flexibility you had, there were always a lot of things that you had to do just because it has always been like that, or because, yeah, that's the way we do it. And I would always challenge it and try to change it, but then if you are a really junior person within a large organization, how much influence do you really have, right? At one point, you either say, now I'm gonna follow the rule, or you're gonna be that rebel fighting against the rule, always having a bloody nose and spending a lot of energy bumping against walls. So I decided, hey, I don't want to have a bloody nose all the time, so I need to create my own playing field. And that's what I did, and after a while I started my first company, right? And it's not, I mean, you get a bloody nose as well, but for different reasons.
What did your parents say to this?
They were totally fine. So I don't have the typical journey of, oh God, how can you leave a well-paid job? They're like, if you like it, if you enjoy it, go on, have fun, right? So as long as you're happy, go ahead.
Okay, great supportive environment. And then working, scaling products up, you turned into an investor.
Yeah.
How did this journey happen?
Look, I think for me, one part of it is giving back, right? So I think helping people in a situation, when you normally start off as a founder, you don't have a lot of network, most of the people, they don't have a lot of money to spend, so it's just part of giving back to that ecosystem, which puts me in a position that I can now do that, right? And on the second element of it being, of course, I also do that with the intention to earn money with it, right? So I'm not, I would say, the angel investor that says, look, most of my time I'm on a golf course, and if I now spend money on 5 startups, I have a nice story to tell. So I think there's nothing against that approach, but I think really, for me, again, money is not the driver in everything, but for me, money is an indicator that what you're doing it well, right? Everybody can invest in startups, but the question is, are you a good investor? What is the ultimate measurement of you being a good investor? If at least you have a certain portfolio size, is what kind of returns are you realizing with your portfolio? So for me, it's not about making the money, it's about that challenge, getting to the system that allows me to beat the market, right? And I think that is for me the driver behind it. And then at one point, I was lucky enough to have some funds, and then I don't need a lot of, let's say, luxury around me, right? So I need good food, I need to see the sun sometimes, so basically I need to flee Berlin like in sometimes November, December, latest February, right? But apart from that, I don't need a big car or whatever. So you ask yourself the question, what do I spend my money now on? And I want to invest it, right? As an entrepreneur, I want to put it in something that makes sense, at least that's the way I approach it. And then I thought, if I now am the 1,256th person in Berlin trying to find the best property, what kind of advantage do I have? None. If I look now at early stage companies, I might be a little bit better suited than the average investor in order to identify what makes a good potential company, a good potential founding team. So that is the reason why I did it, right? And then I think also as an investor, you learn, right? And I think me investing in my first company 10 years ago was completely different to me investing right now. And I think that is the number one advice that I would give people when they think about starting their investment career is think about it from a portfolio perspective. If you want to be successful as an early stage investor, you need to have a certain amount of portfolio companies in order to make returns. So on average, if 30 companies you break even, 50 companies you make 2 times the money, right? And then I think you need to be disciplined also there to say, okay, if I now want to realize returns, I need to make 50 investments, and then you need to understand how much money do you have available, and then you need to distribute that by 50, and that should be the average ticket size that you write. Did I do that? No. Do a lot of people that I know do that? No. What do? They have kind of I don't know which bias it is, but probably an information bias and also kind of a certain level of self-awareness which is lacking. They say, I'm an expert in XYZ, therefore I know better in this category, and I invest triple, quadruple, 5 times the amount I would normally invest because I know better. then they fail. And then it kind of goes before the performance falls apart.
Okay, there was a lot of gold nuggets in there. And it's actually a good segue also to the kind of the health of the ecosystem in Europe. Experience is one of them. Silicon Valley really benefits from this many generations of founders who can give big back to the ecosystem. So how do you see this like health of the ecosystem right now? Maybe start in Berlin, but comparing it also Germany maybe versus like the UK or other countries.
Yeah, so I think for me, I'm not sure how much we gain from comparing. Are we in Europe ever going to be Silicon Valley? No. It's just an ecosystem which has evolved over decades and has special traits that we cannot replicate, no matter how hard we try. It's just something that we're not going to be able to beat them at their own game. I think it's more about each country, Europe versus the US, Europe versus Asia, Berlin versus Munich. No matter what scale you look at, you as an ecosystem, you need to find your own, let's say, niche, your own element where you have strengths that somebody else doesn't have, right? So I think 10 years back, Berlin was a lot of talent, cheap cost of living, right? That was a competitive advantage. People say, look, I come here, office space is none compared to New York or whatsoever. There's a lot of talent, the city has a good vibe, people love to work here. And I think it's really about finding your own strengths rather than saying, how can I become Silicon Valley? How can Munich become Berlin or Berlin, Munich or whatsoever it is? It's really understanding what is your own strength that you have and everybody else gonna have a hard time to replicate, right? So I think that is what I would try to do, rather than saying, look, we all need to become Silicon Valley. I don't know if that would be helpful because there is an ecosystem already which is functioning. And I think as a founder, if you say, look, with my idea, Silicon Valley is the perfect environment where I would thrive, then yeah, you need to go there. But you cannot say, look, I'm not successful because I sit in Berlin right now. Berlin is not Silicon Valley. Yeah. But then it's your duty to go over there, right? So I think it's a little bit sometimes the wrong concept of how we approach it and how we kind of think what ecosystem should be able to do for us. But
I mean, if you look now, there's a big hype in sovereignty, defense, like how can we make Europe stronger? Do you think this is actually the right discussion we're having?
Look, so I think there would say it's a trick question, right? Or it's a tricky question. On the one hand side, is it, and now that sounds a little bit philosophical, but I think, is it the right direction we are heading to as humanity? No. Would it be foolish of us to ignore the reality that we have around us? Yes. So I think for me, it is not something that I wish for or that I support in the sense that I say this is cool. At the same time, I think the reality that surrounds us forces us to acknowledge that we need to invest more in defense, that we need to be able to defend ourselves, that we need to be able also to plan for the worst case, right? Even though I wish for, and if you would have asked me, I don't know, 5 years back, 10 years back, I wouldn't have imagined that, right? But I think no matter where you look on the globe, there's a new reality, right? So I think if you ask me the question, for example, is China going to invade Taiwan, yes or no? Yes, it's only a question of time. It's not the question if yes or no, it's what is going to be the point of time. Or are they going to infiltrate it to the extent that they can easily take it over with no, let's say, hot war? But I think for me, it's to some extent, a new age of imperialism that we're seeing. And in that age, you need to be able to defend yourself.
Yeah, mean, sovereignty is not just defense, it's also supply chain security, materials, data centers, right? Everybody builds data centers. Let's hire NVIDIA knows for the data centers.
But I think the reason for doing that, the reason for having that necessity is that not everybody around you is friendly towards you, right? So if you would assume, hey, we have international supply chains and we have no bad actor in that chain, why would you need to build everything on your own? So right, I think there's a potential risk of partners suddenly becoming enemies where you need, and that is the reason why you need to be more independent. Right?
Still, I mean, Europe, or the money flowing into startups, compared to 2021, it was maybe 120 billion. Now we are like 50 billion. It's still much, much less than it used to be. But everybody's talking about we need to support the European startup ecosystem. Like, why is there such a gap?
Again, there, I would say 2021 is not the right reference point, right? Because I think if you look at the trajectory, I haven't seen the latest numbers, but the trend goes like this, and then you have a normalization again, right? So I think 2020 and 2021 were outliers in the amount of capital that was spent and also the way it was spent, right? And I think, I mean, every public market and every market works in cycles. And we had to some extent a hype cycle, and now we're in a, some say, look, we're already in the phase of recovery, some say we are down cycle. I mean, that's the thing about markets, it's all about psychology and nobody knows exactly, otherwise, I mean, you could go and bet on the stock market if you would know, and that would make you rich. But I think in general, I see the right tendency, if you look at it in a more, let's say, broader lens, like in terms of decades, right? If you look like, when I started my first company, it was, compared to nowadays, really fucking hard to start a company, right? So a lot of the things that do exist right now, they were not there yet. So I think when you look at it from with a broader perspective, it's a really, really nice step forward that we made. And I think in every entrepreneurial journey and every of our lives, there is progression and setbacks. So to that extent, you can see it as a little setback, but the trend generally is the right one.
I mean, let's take that as really beneficial for entrepreneurs. It's got much easier to build companies. And on the other hand, you mentioned like we should compare to Silicon Valley. Let's focus on the strengths. So what do you think are the strengths of Berlin or maybe Germany? What should we focus more on?
Yeah, so I think, for example, one of the categories where we are really great is what is also here one of the focus areas of Neuland is Industry 4.0. So I think that is really one of the areas where Europe and or Germany can lead the way. And I think also there, when you think about Germany as kind of as a nation and what do we do, I think a lot of times we have brilliant ideas, where it really lacks maybe the ecosystem, maybe the right mindset is translating those inventions into kind of a commercial path, right? So when I think, I mean, of course you cannot measure it by the number of patents, but it can be an indicator. So really high when it comes to inventions, when it comes to the number of patents, but we're not good in translating those patents into commercial models. So I think there's a lot of opportunity out there, and there are areas where it's not too late to become the leader, right? But is it too late, at least from a personal point of view? Is somebody gonna build? Would I invest in somebody trying to build the next NVIDIA? No. Would I invest in somebody trying to build the next foundational model? No. But I think there is still so much room out there. I don't know, when it comes to energy production, for example, right? So there's a couple of promising companies here in Germany when it comes to battery technology. So I think also there we are seeing a shift. I would say 5-10 years ago, nobody would touch hardware. Now we see kind of more of capital flowing into hardware again, which I think is good, right? Because that's ultimately also something where you can build kind of a moat, where you can build competitive advantage compared to an AI solution, which is a ChatGPT wrapper that can be replaced in an instant. So I think also there, to some extent, a crisis for one of the, let's say, sub-segments of the market is a chance for another segment of the market. So I think maybe also there the observation is too generalistic, right? Because when we say that the market is in decline, is yes, some segments of the market are, but maybe that's also because they were overvalued therefore, and now there's a correction in that segment, and that correction also goes along hand in hand with a correction in another segment, which means hardware-related more capital inflow for that segment. Right? So what I wish personally, as a founder of a software as a service company, that we still see valuations like we saw in 2021 for software companies. Yes, it's a new reality that I now need to live in, and that you need to adapt to, right?
Yeah. But I'm with you on the industrial part. I noticed this also when I went to like tech or deep tech conferences, and I spoke to investors from the US. They said they were really surprised about the quality of tech startups in Europe, and they were even more surprised about how undervalued they are.
Yeah.
Like the same company could have a much higher value in America. So I think you're right. We have really good talent and the right companies, but there seems to be a gap on commercializing them. And this
Yeah,
is
and
maybe
maybe-
a culture problem.
Yeah, and maybe sometimes we also have the tendency to see things too negatively. Maybe that's also part of the reality there, right? Because I think when you look at the news or whatever it is, it's always first the negative things that come up and that draw our attention. And I think the other way around is if, let's say, if the US is the land of the glory and everything happens there, why is it a lot of US-based VCs are opening up shop in Europe? That would make no sense, right? If there is no opportunity in Europe. So I think, again, right, so it's, of course it's to have a balanced view, but I think sometimes we have too much of a tendency to paint things darker than they are.
Do you think just based on the quality of the startups, do European startups have enough benefit or competitive advantage competing against US, Asia?
Look, I think there when it comes to technical know-how, I would say yes. Is it a little bit more complex to navigate in a European setup compared to a US setup? Yes, right? Because we always talk about the EU and we talk about the US, and they be comparable in terms of the number of people that you can address. But the US, and then of course it's always generalization, is always not doing right to a lot of people, but the US is the US. Like you have one country you sell to. Europe it's complicated, right? So Italy, Spain, France, Germany, Nordics. So it's a higher degree of complexity. I think that alone for me would not be the number one reason to say why it's harder in Europe compared to the US. I think where there is still a difference is in terms of funding, right? So you have less funding available in Europe, and you also I sometimes am a little bit frustrated with the expression of venture capital, because then, I mean, it is a venture, you need to take risk, right? And then also maybe it's also the difference in terms of mindset is when you go into the US, it's about the opportunity. You look at what can this become if it works out? And people see a decacorn, multi-billion-dollar company and think like, this has the potential to get there. When you look at venture capital in Europe, and again, it's generalization, but it's often, now let's go into due diligence and think about all the things that could go wrong, and then you end up with kind of that tiny thing, and you think like, it's never gonna work out. But and then, sorry?
Cultural difference.
Yeah, and then those founders go to the US and they say, yeah, we see the opportunity, here you have 10 million. And then we complain about talent drain, but it's our own fault, right?
Do you think, so what's the role of educational institutes? So I think it's really awesome that Unite, this kind of group, is working with you, but I think education starts much earlier, right, to change this mindset.
Yeah, I think you never can start early enough, right? So I think you can see totally different when you have exposure to an entrepreneurial background, right? So it's I think, yeah, I don't know how to integrate it in school, but my idea would be to open that up as a kind of job opportunity or as a potential route to live your life as early as possible for people, right? So for me, that's one of the biggest criticisms that I would have with the school system is it focuses a lot of time on the content, and you need to learn about history and whatsoever, and then you finish school, and I had 1 hour that I needed to go to the Arbeitsamt, and they told me what I could become, and that was something like, yeah, you could become a butcher, and he's like, yeah, sorry, but this is one of the most important decisions in your life, how you spend your professional career, and our school is not at all preparing people for taking that decision. Nowadays, I cannot tell you anymore why I studied economics versus becoming a law student. I don't know, right? So it could have turned out to become a lawyer, right? But I think we need it in kind of, yeah, really show people that this is a potential job that they can do. And I think also there, and I don't want to sound like the entrepreneur complaining, but again, there I think also on that side, the perspective and the standing of entrepreneurs in society is way better in the US than in Europe. So I think, and again, I exaggerate because it makes it easier to get the point. In the US, if you make it, people will congratulate you. They say, look, nice, well done. If you fail, they say, look, stand up, do it again. You will succeed the second time. In Europe, or at least in Germany, I would say, when you make it, you're the turbo capitalist who is sure has made his money because he treated the employees bad. And if you fail, people say, look, I told you so, it's not going to work out. So I think it's not really, I mean, it's better than being a politician, but it's not super well received to be an entrepreneur, I would say. Yeah.
Talking about politicians or policies, what do you think, are there some policies that could actually help the ecosystem, like EU, like maybe unified capital markets?
I think that I'm a big fan of Europe, but I think the error in the whole construct is that you set up kind of that legislation and system, and you didn't unify it enough because there's still different countries which all have different requirements. So we are all in different, let's say, economic realities, so you need different interest policies. How do you do it as a European Union to set kind of an interest rate that suits all the countries that you're representing? It's by design impossible. And I think, for me personally, it's less regulation, right? So I think a lot of times, I mean, I run a company right now that I co-founded, it's 200 people, and the amount of regulation we have to deal with that comes from the EU is unimaginable, right? So, and I think the biggest problem there is the general idea behind it is the right one, but then there is a law which is passed by the EU, and then every country translated it into national law. And for example, there is the gender pay gap law, right, which comes into effect in June next year. And it makes sense to have this, yes, but still, as of today, we don't know exactly what are the requirements that we as a company have to fulfill in 6 months. So we need to start to prepare, because technically we can get fined if we don't follow the rules, which we don't know yet what they're gonna be exactly in 6 months. And that is kind of, I think, not the idea there. And again, it is complex to do it in the right way, but I think in some parts less regulation would help everybody, right?
I always think that it would be great to see more entrepreneurs in politics. Have you ever thought about that?
I think, I mean, there are a lot of clever people in politics, right? But I think it's really probably, if you ask me personally, I would say it's how the whole system is designed, right? So, because when you get into office, the question is not, how do I now fight for what I told people are gonna do and how do I make change? The biggest question is, how do I get re-elected? And I think, for me, I would prefer something where you say, look, I don't know, maybe you're elected for a longer period of time, maybe it's 8 years, right? And then you cannot be re-elected again, right? But you really now work on implementing what you promised people that you're gonna do, and maybe also there, I mean, as the CEO of a company, I not only have a benefit, but I also have a liability, I have a risk. And I think that should be the case for politicians as well. To some extent, they should be held responsible. Somebody blows billions on something which doesn't make sense, and they get bad press for a week, and then that's it.
Yeah.
I think that is not my idea of responsibility, right?
That's right. Okay, last 2 questions from my side, then we will open it up to the audience. So based on the discussion today, what do you think European startups should focus on to thrive?
Yeah, and I think there I have to go back to what I said earlier. It's focus on your strengths, right? Really understand where am I positioned compared to my competition, where I'm positioned in the international, let's say, landscape, and what is really the number one thing that makes me unique, and I can defend as a long-term competitive advantage also against international competition, right? So I think, again, going back to that idea of what do I have as strength, right? So if I know I cannot beat the Silicon Valley company with the amount of funding, I need to find alternative ways to beat them if they are in the same market. Maybe it's better tech, maybe it's more efficiency, maybe, right? So I think that is the way I would approach it, right? Because you will find unique strength within your company, within yourself, within your city, within your country. So I think that is
And just out of curiosity, to challenge you,
yeah.
all the companies in your portfolio, would you say they focus on those strengths?
Yeah. So for example, I have one company, it's called Some AI, and what they do is they invented a logic where they can translate websites into easy language. And that is a requirement, again, by the European Union to say that if you're a government agency, you have to provide your website in easy language. I think it becomes mandatory also in 2026 for companies. So a lot of companies and also a lot of government bodies didn't do it because they didn't know how to do it. So that startup went out, created a research paper with a professor from Hamburg and saying, look, this is an efficient way to do it. And now with that research paper, they approach all the government agencies and say, look, we looked at your website, you're not doing it. There is a regulation which enforces that you do it. And by the way, the excuse of you cannot do it in an efficient manner is not the case anymore because we have a solution for you. And with that, they have a conversion rate of 40%. And I asked the founder, what about the remaining 60? And she said, yeah, they are still in the pipeline, but we cannot convert them in this budget cycle. And that is the point where I said, okay, I'm gonna invest. Because then you think they are building that nucleus around the regulation where you say, yeah, stupid regulation, but the approach is how can I use that regulation to my advantage to build a nucleus of strengths that I can start from and then expand from there. It's a little bit like why was Adidas for a long period of time struggling against Nike because Nike had a home market which was so strong. And I think it is now that little nucleus that they have, which is working well, and from there they start to expand the product portfolio.
Great example of that. Okay, is there any key message you want to leave the audience with here today?
I think, like I said, right, so coming back to the topic of, I wouldn't really compare too much, right, and for me, there is no, we are kind of, it's not against Europe, against the US, it's not really against Berlin, it's about how can I leverage personally in the ecosystem that I live in, what I got, right, in order to create the best possible outcome. And I think to that extent is, and that is maybe something that we can also learn from the US, is try to leverage the network more actively, right? Reach out to people. And I mean, I respond to every LinkedIn message that I get. If it is not an email trying to sell me, if a founder reaches out to me asking me to do X, Y, Z, I will kind of respond to that. And I think there's a lot of people who do that, but not enough people try. So I think in that sense is, can never give up and really have kind of put the energy into it if you really want to do it. And I think there's that famous story of the Canva founder, right? So she reached out to, I don't know how, 100 investors and they all rejected, and then number 101 or 102, that was the number one fit, and now it's a $1 billion company. So I think the question is really if you, and that's what I believe in, if you really want to do that and you find signals that could work, if you put all your energy into it, it's going to work at some point. Yeah. It's going to be tough, and maybe there's a point where you say, I don't know, I should give up, but I think in the end, it's going to work out. I always say, if it's not good yet, it's not yet, right? So in that sense, continue until you get to the point.
Okay, just for the audience to get to know you better, we have a couple of rapid fire questions.
Yes.
You can see them here. Introvert or extrovert?
Introvert, learn to be extrovert.
Okay. Passion or purpose?
Purpose.
Cat or dog?
100%
Apple or Android?
Apple.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Early riser or night owl?
Night owl, learn to be early riser because I have 2 kids.
Car or bike?
Car.
Berlin, just kidding.
Okay.
Movie or book?
That is the first one I cannot say, right? Because I was reading a lot of books earlier on. Now I tell myself I don't have the time and I watch movies, right? But I think if I would have to decide for one, I would choose books.
Okay, let's give it up for the break. Any questions from you?
Yeah, I'm curious to hear maybe a little bit more about the very early stages of where you started products up.
Yeah.
Where did you get the idea? And how did it look like? Did you start by yourself, or did you have a small team? And being at stage now myself, I'm very curious to hear. And do you have any tips?
Yeah. So the way we started it was we were two, so kind of technical co-founder and myself, and it basically started from let's say SEO dropshipper logic, where we took products, we uploaded them on something which was called Frugal Google Base back then. It's now Google Shopping. And we kind of started to play around with the product information, and we saw that optimizing the product information would yield better results. So we did that then as an agency service, telling people, hey, we saw your product on Frugal. If you give us your product feed, we're gonna optimize it for you and pay us on the additional revenue that you're gonna realize. So we started off as an agency doing that. We then were the two of us. I was kind of writing cold emails after my day job, and then we ended up getting the first clients on board, kind of getting the first employees from the first revenue, and I think we didn't pay ourselves a single euro for the first, I don't know, 5 years, 6 years, something like that. So really, or at least not a lot, right? So we were always the lowest paid employees at our own company. And I think then what we did with that agency, of course, you think about how can we optimize it. So we started to build technical helpers internally, like kind of repetitive processes, writing small technical applications in order to do those. And at one point, which at that day was a catastrophe, but in hindsight was probably the best thing that happened to us. Google said, and I still remember that day because we had our Christmas party the day before. At 5 o'clock in the morning, I woke up, just looked at my phone and had like missed calls and all of them. And I was like, oh, what's going on? Checked, and at that day, Google turned that channel into a paid channel. So meaning advertisers now had to pay for it, which meant that 30 to 40% of our agency clients churned because they said, we don't know if it's going to work out with that channel. And at that day, we thought, hey, A, it is not the best business model of the world being an agency. B, how can we be less dependent on Google as a channel? And we kind of turned it into a software as a service model where we say, we have all those tools and technologies internally. If we now put a user interface on top of it, we can also give it to people to use it. And so I think that's the journey, how it started. And I think what kind of advice would I give you? Right? So I think that is really a tough question because it depends on what is it that you do, like what is the stage and what is your biggest challenge, right? So I think when you, are you a solo founder? Are you on your own?
Yeah, but
Yeah. So then my biggest recommendation is get somebody involved. Because it's just, no matter how brilliant you are, it's easier to do it as a team of 2 or 3, right? And I think it's also, there's a lot of value always in exchange. Of course, this comes with a disclaimer, you need to find the right person, right? And I would take always a lot of time to identify who that is, right? So I think this is one of the make or break questions. I mean, why do most companies in the early stages fail? That is because of founder split up, right? And I think that is one of the most crucial elements that you can decide on early on with the company. And I think that is also one of the reasons why, as a company, we are where we are, because we never did compromise on the quality of the people. So I think it's really, for hiring, for me, it's definitely, if it does, and that sounds harsh, it's hire, slow, fire, fast, right? So, but I think also here, that is not my personality would say. I would love to coach everybody to the point where they perform. The reality is, in now, what is it, 20 years doing business, I had one case where it worked well. And I sat in that meeting, I said, look, it's not gonna work, we need to part ways. And he told me, it's like, no, I never got fired because of performance, I'm gonna work now for 6 months without salary, I'm gonna show you that it works. And he did. So I think that was a special case, but I think the reality also behind it is, it's not that the person sitting in front of you is not a good person, doesn't have qualification when you let them go. It's just, it's not a fit between them and the organization. And I think that's always the message that I bring across when you have those tough conversations. Those are, I think, no matter how long you do it, those are the toughest conversations that you have if you need to let somebody go. And I think there, what you do is you enter the meeting, you say, this is why we're meeting, we're gonna let you go, and then you can start discussing. I've seen so many awful discussions and kind of ways of doing that meeting effort, like, this sounds now like a meeting where somebody's gonna promote somebody, right? And then you sit there for 10 minutes, you watch that, and then comes the hammer of, we need to let you go, and you think, what the fuck is happening here? So I think there's one thing how you handle it, and I think, therefore, hire, slow, fire, fast means just realizing when it's not a fit and telling people it's not about you, right? It's between us, it's not a fit. But you're gonna really do an amazing job somewhere else.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Johannis, so you're not tired of sitting in this fire?
Oh, it's okay. That's okay.
I was just thinking about your eyes. Maybe slightly changing the topic, because I'm in your investment scheme. Are you also an active business angel? I assume with 50 investments, it's not probably the case, but do you have time to look into some startups saying, okay, I have the network, I have some ideas on how to make it work?
Yeah.
And the second question, what's your average ticket if you go?
Yeah. So I take the latter one first because it's easier. It's around 75,000 euros. And am I an active angel investor? The answer is yes, if it is required. So I think also there, I'm not the angel investor that looks for a side gig or a job or kind of activities to spend my time. I'm not bored, right? So that's not the point. But I think the founders that I look for are people that are 100% capable of running their own company. They don't need support, but they are stronger with support. So they know exactly, here is the point where I would benefit from getting input. So they call me and then I respond within half an hour or an hour, whatever it is. So it's not that, I would say, in the other type there, third type is kind of in business days where they say, that's a great team, it's a great idea. The only thing that I'm not really good at is sales, but I can do sales. And then they invest in a company, they have that idea of making it work by their own contribution. That is not a case I would invest in. So I think about companies as a potential investment target, if I kind of can accelerate them, but they're perfectly fine going without me. And then for me, the superpower is always speed, right? So I think that is the number one that I think of. If somebody reaches out to me today, I'm gonna respond today, right? Because your reality is, if I say, look, sorry, I was a week on Havana, I didn't have time to respond, your reality is completely different. Your mind is something completely different, and what you asked me for a week ago is completely irrelevant to you. So I think that is the number one. So what I do when I want to invest in a company, I offer the founders, because I think that is also what founders should do more often, to do their due diligence on their investors. So I always offer the possibility and say, look, pick two of my portfolio companies, I'm gonna introduce you to the CEO, you can have a talk. And then, luckily enough, never did they come back and say, no, we don't want you as an investor. And the uniform, let's say, highlight that people get is speed, right? So that they say, look, he is really speed. Because I think that's one of the skills how we can beat as a small company a larger one, by being more agile, being quicker in your decision making, and having more iterations.
Does the scheme work where the business angel does not only bring the money, but for example, sales, or for example, some other skills that are currently lacking the company?
It can work, right? So I'm not saying it could not work, but I think it's just not the way I operate, and I
You don't do it
think.
for 50 companies, for sure.
Yeah, but I also think I think normally you should have all the required skills internally as a company, right? So it's like if you say, look, I'm a tech company, but I'm outsourcing my development, I would always think, how good is that, and how sustainable is that, and what kind of an additional risk does that create, right? So maybe you get a brilliant angel investor, and he or she is in kind of mastermind in sales, and it works for half a year, and then he or she says, look, I gotta now move with the family somewhere else. No. End of story, right? So I think it can work. I think where I would be absolutely, which is an absolute no-go for me, is if people invest money and then try to sell services. Don't touch that, right? So I think I've seen cases, but I've never seen good cases.
Like, I don't know.
Yeah, when you say, look, I
advisors,
gotta invest 100K, and I'm gonna support you on sales, and my daily rate is 500 euros, or 1,000. There are people out there who are doing that, but for me, it's a no-go.
But then the other way around, saying that they're not charging this money, but they just increase the shares. If there's a milestone reached, then, sorry, I'm just.
Yeah, the thing is, you can't do that, and for me, the risk is lower, because then you kind of bind it towards a specific kind of development or a specific outcome. At the same time, my view is that every company that at least I know of also needs sales capabilities in-house. And so if it is a temporary solution, I say, look, we're in the process of hiring somebody to head our sales, and yes, I can step in for 2 months before you have that person, and I can train them later on. Yes, maybe, but it's really something that, yeah, I think you need to figure out for your case, if it can work, yes or no. But in general, I would say rather try to have the core functions kind of within the founder team.
I have a couple of questions. And I would like to know how this work for you. Like, how do you validate the product idea? Like, from all your startups where you invested, how do you think, okay, this is gonna work, this is not gonna work? Or how do you, what do you suggest for the founders?
So I think that the way I try to approach it and the way I try to understand it is every founder that comes to you is of the conviction that they invented something amazing which the world needs, right? So that is the same for everybody. I think what I try to do is I try to put it in a broader ecosystem and try to understand how differentiated is it from the reality and the solutions which are already existing out there. And sometimes you see that maybe there's a differentiation in technology, but in the way or in the perception of the end user, much of a difference, right? And then I say, how do you really, what is your plan to now also win when it comes to go to market, when it comes to customer acquisition? And I think when I have that kind of combination of there is a product where there is a requirement out there in the market, and then there is a clever way of bringing it to the market, which is also cost efficient, then I think I found a combination that can work, right? So going back there to that example, we say it's a problem, kind of the summer AI example, right? Saying, hey, it's a service that everybody needs. There is no question, do you want it? Everybody needs it because it's a regulated market and it's a requirement. And then the second part is how do you bring it to market? You can, because it's government, you can know exactly who you need to talk to. And then you have a good sales argument how to kind of convince it. And then you have a combination of a product which is needed by the market and an intelligent and clever way to bring it to the market, and then I think you have a combination that can work. And sometimes it's just that feeling, right? So I don't know. So I still don't get X. The product doesn't make sense.
Yeah, next question related to sales, like marketing and sales.
Yeah.
So what do you suggest for your founders, like what's the best marketing strategy or sales?
I think you cannot generalize.
Okay.
So it really depends on what are you selling, what is the buying persona, what is your competition look like, what is the kind of size of contracts that you're trying to sell, right? So it's a completely different approach. I mean, if you look at SaaS, there is a nice image where how to build a 100 million ARR company, and you can build it by bringing in 100 clients which are 1 million each, or you can build it by kind of 100 million clients which bring $1 each. So the question is really
B2B.
I think I'm not in a position to give you, hey, here's your silver bullet. I can't, right? So because it's too complex, it really depends on the individual product that you're trying to sell, your competitive landscape, the question where you want to sell it, what is your strategy, right? So do you want to become a profitable company immediately? Can you afford to burn money and maybe acquire customers early on with making a deficit, but they are so super sticky that they're going to be kind of your customers in 20 years time? So even if I would wish to give you a precise answer to that question, I simply can't.
So last question, like, I mean, I know a little bit about the questions what I'm asking, but I want to know your experience, like, so how to find the best co-founder, like what qualities, what matching.
Again, right, so,
I mean,
sorry, please not be precise. The question, the answer is it depends. It depends on what are your skills, right? And I think that is the best starting point. Probably the profile that you look for is a profile where you say, those are my deficits, right? So that is what I would require in order to be perfect. And that is what you're looking for as traits in a co-founder, so that you balance each other. The first company that I started, my skill set was super similar to the one of my co-founder. That was not a good match, right? Because then it becomes a question of you're always going in the same direction, you're doing the same things, and then it's only the question who pulls harder. But you need to be kind of covering different areas of the pitch, so to say, right? So therefore I would say, what are your weaknesses? And that's what I would look for in a co-founder. And then don't make the choice too easily, right? So it's really literally like, it's like getting married, and you also, you're not appear in front of the altar in a week's time, right? So I think it's really taking the time to get to know each other, work together, have a plan. And I think also that is for me the biggest misconception when you when you see founding teams, and I did the same, I thought like, yes, we start with our vesting, and then the stupid investors come around and force vesting rules. When I start a company right now, I would always implement vesting from the first day, also without any external capital. Because the biggest problem is kind of, if you now imagine you start with 2 other people and you each own a third of the company, after a year they both walk away, the company's dead, right? Because nobody's gonna invest in that, and you gotta be demotivated because you say, look, I know work my ass off, and 2/3 of the benefit can go to somebody that's not working for the company. And I had a case where that actually happened. I was invested in a company. The company got acquired for $120 million by a US company. There were 2 founders. One left after his shares vested, and the second one stayed on for, I think, till the point of the exit. It was close to 10 years. And the one who left the company after 3 years at the exit, he got like 20 million. The one that stayed on got 2, and the rest converted into shares of the acquirer that went to 0. So, not fair.
Exiting at the right time.
Yeah, not fair, but that's the way it is.
Because that was a part of the deal and he was the CEO of the company, or it
Yeah.
was his own decision to?
Yeah. So, I mean, how do you?
That's nasty. I mean,
How do you get acquired by somebody and then you tell them, look, I don't believe in your joint vision? So I think he could have cashed out. So there was a plan how to kind of how he could have sold his shares also over time. So they were locked up for a certain period. But then I think he got caught up in that idea. Now the stock plummeted, but it's going to recover, and so in the end, it was not a good deal for him.
First of all, thank you, Johannes, for coming. I think there's a lot to learn from you. Earlier in our conversation, you said you have invested in more than 80 companies now. I want to know, how do you prioritize a company over the other? Is it purely on how much returns the company generates, or because there are more than 80 companies but just one Johannes? How do you manage it?
You mean in terms of the time that I allocate?
Yeah.
Or, yeah.
Time and support.
Look, again, so 80 companies sounds a lot, right?
Sorry.
And it is. At the same time, there is a logic to bring that down, and the logic is companies go bankrupt and companies get acquired. So of the, let's say, 84 companies that I invested in, I would say 50 are active still, right? So that brings the number down. Then if you think about them being in different stages, some of those companies are now companies with thousands of employees, right? Funding of multiple $100 million that went into the, so there, I'm rather, I would say, with one of the founders, I go for lunch every half year and we exchange, right? But it's not that he calls me and says, look, I require your input right now in his entrepreneurial journey. He's maybe, I don't know, 2 steps ahead of me even, right? So I think then that again brings that number down, right? And then it comes back to the quality of the companies I invest in. Like I said, it's those people who are able to run their company on their own, but when they have a specific question, they reach out. And then if you take 50 companies and every founder would reach out, I don't know, twice a year, every half year, then still the amount of work would be manageable, right? So the question then becomes more about, let's say, more intense kind of engagement. So when I, for example, one of the topics that I love is pricing, right? And from time to time I didn't sit down and do sorry. What can I do? But I think that is important there, and I think that is the big difference there between being a professional investor and being somebody that puts occasionally money into the company. And I think you also as a founder, you should only go with professional investors because you don't want to have somebody yelling at you saying, hey, where's my 100K? I need it right now. It's like, but you invested in a startup, right? So it's illiquid. Maybe if you're lucky, you see it in 10 years, right? So I think you need to work with people who have that understanding and they know that kind of the whole industry works in a way that you have outlier companies who repay for the losses in your portfolio, but part of the job description is you're gonna lose companies in your portfolio, right?
Okay, looking at the watch here, maybe one last
Yeah, I have one last question. So to maybe to summarize, so yeah, thank you so much, Johannis, for a wonderful talk. It's very inspiring, and also I was very impressed with the shift you took from working as a full-time job and took this entrepreneurial journey. And when I was discussing this topic with my friends in Germany, most of them will always say in Germany, Germany is not the best country to become an entrepreneur. It is the best country to become an employee, for example. So why do you risk your job and start something on your own? You're crazy. So these kind of inputs I get when I discuss these things with my friends in Germany. What is your take on this? What kind of challenges
I can
you
only say
face?
my I agree to disagree, right? So I think there's a lot of also companies and entrepreneurs in Germany that became successful, right? And I think not only in that case, but I think I don't want to sound like the kind of gray-haired old man right now, but I think a lot of times in life, a good question is, what is the worst thing that could happen if you face with a decision? And for me, starting a company, the worst thing that could have happened is I need to go back to my old job and do it again. Is that so bad? So then you take a risk. Then you start it and you see where it goes. So I think, again, the thinking is often, yeah, but what could go wrong and whatever. And yes, if you analyze long enough, you find all the different reasons why you shouldn't do it. But again, if you ask yourself the question, what is the worst case scenario that could happen? And most of the times it's not that bad, right? So my conviction is always, it's about the skills that you have. And if you start a company right now and it fails, you're gonna come back way more skilled than when you started. So is that bad? No. Have you maybe suffered for 2 years? Yes. But I think if you really want to do it, then go ahead. Right? And I think that's the mindset that I always apply, and I think which gives you also some extent of freedom. I think when I think one of the things that I want to do is travel the world, right? And maybe I visited, 35, 40 countries so far. There's a lot to discover. And I think, yes, of course, I can imagine a nice way of traveling when you earn some money and you can fly, business class, first class, or whatsoever. But at the same time, my mindset is nobody's going to hold me back. If I need to work on a ship to finance, me getting my buddy from Europe to the US, then I will do that. I can still travel. Is it as comfortable as flying first class? No. But it's not going to hold me back from realizing what I want. And I think the same is applicable there. Why should you not risk it? Why should you not do it, right? And I think, friends are not, in a lot of ways they're trying to help, but sometimes they're not, right? So because they're not the ones taking the risk. And it's about the opportunity, right? And I think, maybe as a closing remark, that is what I would do. I would, on the one hand side, look at what is the worst outcome that could potentially happen. And on the other hand side, coming back to the discussion that we had before, looking at the opportunity, right? So being focused not on what could go wrong, but what could actually happen if it works out. And then you see, I would say 99.9% of the cases, you see a ratio where you only, say, logical decision for me as an entrepreneur is, yes, I gotta try. I have nothing to lose, nothing. Only a lot of things to win, right?
Yeah. Great. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Great.
Yeah, what try to give first, try to help others, and try to make some friends. Not just exchange business cards. It will really make a difference in your life. And if you want, you can check out the startupmind.com. They have, you can get an account there, register yourself, especially if you're a startup. They have a lot of perks if you're part of this membership. And yeah, as Ranjan and I mentioned, like we're volunteering here. We're always happy for any help. We're super happy with Neuland of sponsoring and helping us with this. But we're open for any non-cash or cash support. So with this, thank you for coming. We can still stay here and eat, I think. Yeah, okay.
Maybe we can have a group photo.
Oh yes, let's have a group photo.